Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our very special live streamed event celebrating World Giraffe Day, which was on Sunday this week. So tonight we'll be talking all about giraffe and why their disappearance is being called the silent extinction. Tonight we have an amazing lineup of speakers for you who work directly with giraffe, both in the wild and also, under human care at the Zoo Miami. We're working in different ways to help save giraffe and restore their populations across Africa in the wild. But before we get started, my name is Wendy Hapgood. I am one of the co-founders of Wild Tomorrow Fund. We're a wildlife conservation organization based both here in New York and on the ground in Zululand, South Africa. Our mission is to save wildlife and wild spaces, and our biggest project is habitat protection. So we're saving habitat for many species of wildlife, from elephants to lions, leopards, rhinos, and of course, my favorite, giraffe. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce our speakers tonight. Let me first bring, we're very excited to be hosting this event together with Reclaimed Earth. Let me bring in Yvette Ayala to tell you more. Here she is.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much for doing this with us. I was very excited to jump on board. So Reclaimed Earth is a nonprofit dedicated to the conservation of endangered wildlife, specifically endangered wildlife. And we work really well with organizations like yours because we have a variety of projects, not a specific focus. And what you guys are doing with, protecting these wild spaces in South Africa is just incredible. And we're honored to be partnered with you all.
Thank you. And you're based in Florida, right?
Yeah, so we're based in Miami, Florida. We're about 2 years old now, and we've had we've been lucky enough to find the right people and really create some really amazing projects. We're helping out the first elephant orphanage in South Africa, and we do a yearly volunteer trip with you all that was really, really successful last year. So
yeah, and it's nothing better than coming to the field and helping out on a trip that's benefiting conservation. So we're delighted to have people join us from Miami and Florida. And now it's thanks to you that we have amazing panelist speakers from Zoo Miami. What's your connection to the zoo?
So as a child growing up in Miami, I visited the zoo because my parents would take me there, kind of let's entertain the kids for the day. And then as I grew up, I really got to see the difference between how Zoo Miami operates and other zoos out there. They're just exceptional, and their goal is always conservation. So I got involved in their young professionals group called Wild Bunch. And basically their goal is to expand the awareness of what the zoo is doing for conservation. So it goes hands in hand with Reclaimed Earth. And so yeah, I've gotten to meet some of these awesome zookeepers and had awesome experiences with the animals at the zoo. And I'm excited Rob and Tabitha were able to join us.
We are really excited too. So let me bring on screen Tabitha Miller. Hi, Tabitha.
Hi, how are you?
We're so excited to have you with us. And Tabitha is basically the African wildlife animal care coordinator for the zoo. Maybe you could tell us more about your amazing job.
Yeah, I have a really big team, but we have a lot of animals, so it's mostly the African hoofstock of the zoo, and we have just under 90 animals in our care, and our job is just to make sure that they have the best life that they can. We monitor them for anything that goes wrong, or potential pregnancies or births or anything like that, and make sure that they're enriched daily and that everybody is happy and getting along. And sometimes we have, animals that we have to separate and remove due to just age and coming into maturity, and they're not, not supposed to be in the herd anymore. But our job is just basically their well-being. And it's a really physical task, but
can imagine.
We all love our animals and would do anything for them. So,
and you have a herd of giraffe that you look after?
We do. We currently have 6. The last baby just shipped out to her new home earlier this year. We had three calves last year, so we have 3 females that all gave birth within a couple of months of each other.
Wow. Can't wait to talk more about that tonight. I mean, who doesn't love giraffe babies? So we're very excited. And let me bring on your amazing colleague. Hi, this is Lara.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Great. And what can you tell us more about your role at the Zoo Miami?
Absolutely. So my role is the guest engagement coordinator for the animal programs at the zoo. So I get to work with all the keepers in various areas. I also get to spend a lot of time with the ambassador team, working with the ambassador animals, and then sharing them with people that come through the zoo. But the main gig that I have is to focus on keeper talks and behind the scenes tours with everybody that comes through the zoo. And one of the funnest things that we get to do is really just get out and engage with the guests that come to the zoo, that basically make sure that we have a job, right? So yeah, having that opportunity day in and day out, my favorite thing is to really just make memories with people. We like to be that person that gives people like Yvette that memory of coming to the zoo and just wanting to keep coming back and
right.
Kind of establishing that connection for people. So it's huge because as Tabitha said, it ain't easy being a zookeeper, especially in this subtropical Miami that we love. So it's a lot of work, and I love being the one to help brighten everyone's day and help teams out when they need it, and for the most part be there for the guests when they have questions and when they get excited and when they're not expecting it. It's my favorite part. So
that's amazing. We can't wait to hear more about it tonight. Let me bring in Axel. This is Axel Honeycutt. Yvette, I'm going to take you backstage for a minute so that we go to 4. Hold on. There's Axel. Axel Honeycutt is Walter Marathon's Africa ecologist. So he gets to be around wildlife every day when he's in America right now, but usually in the field. So he's handling wild animals, which is a different, aspect of conservation. So thanks again, Axel, for being part of the discussion.
No, it's great to be here and great to talk about giraffes. It's an extremely important topic. And being in the field, I get to interact with giraffes quite a bit, not as hands-on as the guys from the zoo, but still incredible nonetheless.
Yeah. We have lots of questions for the zookeepers, so we'll get there soon.
We're so ready.
Yeah. I'm going to cross to Axel. So I'm going to come back to you guys. Axel, I think before we get the very most important thing I think to talk about tonight is what is the status of giraffe right now? Actually, and can you tell us more about this global decline? And sorry, I'm going to bring Tabitha and Rob back in if you guys want to also, add to Axel's description.
Yeah, of course.
Of the giraffe conservation.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. So yeah, giraffes, when you think about extinction, you think about animals that are facing extinction or they're endangered. Generally our mind tends to go to these charismatic megafauna, rhinos and elephants and, some of the big cats. But we usually don't think of giraffes as being, they're just sort of, giraffes are always kind of in the background. And I don't mean that in a personal way, but they're not one of the big five. They're not one of the animals that you go to, tick off your box and see. Maybe a lot of people do, but it's definitely not on our mind when we think about extinction. But the fact is that giraffes are in an extremely serious situation at the moment. And, while we might be thinking of rhinos and elephants, the numbers that giraffes have are actually very surprising. And I think it will surprise a lot of people to learn that there's only about 100,000, just over 100,000 giraffes in the wild. And that includes all the species or the subspecies, which we'll talk about in a second. And that's about a 25% of what we have for elephants. We only have about 400,000 elephants in the wild. So there are, it's a serious decline of what they used to be. Some of those causes, why giraffes are in this state, is largely because of habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, poaching. A lot of the areas where giraffes are, there's a lot of civil unrest and civil war, and therefore, people are utilizing giraffes, and also the wildlife trade. So they face the same threats that most other megafauna unfortunately do. According to a 2015 report by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which is the IUCN, wild giraffe numbers dropped from an estimated 155,000 in 1985 to just under 100,000 in 2015. So that's 30 years. The population dropped by more than 30% in 3 giraffe generations, because giraffes tend to live about 25 years. Generational length is about 10 years. So yeah, giraffes are facing a lethal combination of habitat loss, poaching, and the wildlife trade that's just led to this catastrophic collapse of their population in the wild. The other thing is that giraffes are, they're an extremely charismatic species that even, people in the States and Europe and Australia and other parts of the world outside of Africa are extremely familiar with. But the fact is that giraffes are actually really under-researched. So scientists, for it being such an iconic species, there's a lot of research that still needs to be done to understand the giraffes' ecology and conservation and their status in the world. In 2016, giraffes were listed as a species by the IUCN on the red list. They were moved up to vulnerable. So that means that, they were previously listed as least concern, although there were still not that many of them. And now they're listed as vulnerable, which is right below endangered. So they're almost an endangered species. In November 2018, 7 of the 9 currently recognized subspecies were assessed, and they're now listed, or they've been assessed and now they're listed on the red list. And 2 of those are critically endangered. Another one is endangered, another one's vulnerable. And there's many other giraffes and other subpopulations that are facing significant declines. At the same time, giraffes in southern Africa have actually been doing surprisingly well. And that decline has been pretty significant and quite scary. And, if we think about giraffes and their distribution across Africa, giraffes at one point extended from all the way in North Africa and Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, those countries, all the way down to South Africa. Anywhere where there was savanna woodland, the habitat, these dry savannas that were the suitable habitat for giraffes. And today that range has just decreased dramatically. And it's to the point that we don't even really have a number for that decrease in distribution, because, like as I mentioned earlier, there are many populations of giraffes across Africa that still haven't been assessed yet. So they face a lot of challenges, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's an absolutely amazing graphic to see. We talk all the time at the zoo about how their habitat is fragmented, but we don't always have the map and the PowerPoint presentation to really get the point across to people. But we often ask people, if how many, or do you think there's more giraffes or elephants in the wild? And very few people get it right. And giraffes, 1,000 or 1/4 of the population of elephants is staggering, because a lot of people grow up thinking giraffes are everywhere. They're at every zoo I go to. And I think overall, just things like this to really share this staggering numbers is something that we have to do a lot more of.
And Axel, I think something else that's really interesting about giraffe, and I think it points to them being historically under-researched. Here's a question for you. Is a giraffe, or are there other kinds of giraffe?
Yeah, it's a good point, because as I mentioned, the IUCN, which is a collection of scientists and experts on different species that operate around the world, they currently list giraffes as being one species with 9 different subspecies. But according to the most recent research, peer-reviewed articles and academic projects and research programs that have been done specifically on the DNA work of giraffes, there are actually many distinct different types of giraffes that are as different, if you want to equate it to bears, as different from black bears to polar bears. Mm-hmm. And they actually have been genetically and geographically isolated reproductively for 0.3, 300,000 to almost 1.5 million years. So the evidence that we've seen so far is that, and this is where maybe policy and legislation lags a little behind scientific work and findings, is that at the moment it's believed that there are 4 distinct species of giraffe, and there are 5 subspecies within those. So that's you've got the Maasai giraffe, the northern giraffe, which has 3 different subspecies. Then we have the reticulated, and then the southern African giraffe, which has 2 different subspecies. But at the moment, as I said, the IUCN lists all of them as being vulnerable. But when you start to break it down, and now that we know that there's 4 different species, those species they're gonna have different ranks, and some of them are endangered.
Right. And what species of giraffe do you have at the zoo?
We have reticulated.
Okay. And how are they?
Yeah, reticulated giraffe. I mean, that clearly the number is shocking that there's only 15,000 of those guys in the wild. That's really horrible. And giraffe really are like a keystone species. When you come to any zoo, you want to see a giraffe. Everybody wants to see a giraffe and be on a feeding platform and feeding them. So that's just really sad that they're that, much of a draw for any AZA accredited institution where you want to go and you want to see these beautiful animals, and they're gigantic, and they're not like any other animal species, but there's only 15,000 of that particular species. And then to realize that there are other subspecies of the same variation that we're not even aware of, and they're not documented, and we don't know their numbers, and it's heartbreaking, but
yeah,
we're trying.
I think that's why it's so important. That World Giraffe Day exists. I think it's actually pretty new, to raise awareness for giraffe and their conservation challenges that people know. And that's why it's being called the silent extinction, because it's sort of a surprise to most people. Because they seem like they're everywhere, but they're really actually, like every wild animal, mostly, in big trouble. I think, Axel, you had a slide with showing the different species and their numbers, or if...
Yes, we do have a slide for that. One of the most interesting, not interesting, but really sad, is that there's the West African giraffe, which occurred across multiple countries in Western Africa, and now it's restricted to just one country, Niger. And the population, I know the slide we just showed was listed at 600. Those numbers keep changing. At one point, it was estimated that it was a single population, a single site, where there was only about 100 individuals of that subspecies.
Wow.
So these are numbers that, when we talk about mountain gorillas and we talk about black rhinos, I mean, these are very similar numbers, and they're shocking. And that's one reason why it's called the silent extinction. Is
Absolutely.
Even myself as an ecologist, it's like it blows your mind. Why aren't we talking about this more?
Yeah, and extinction today is something that is happening whether we want it to or not. People don't remember that we are in the middle of the next big extinction event. I think it's great to see that some of the giraffe species are coming back. I think it's great to know that zoos and aquariums and our giraffe feedings and the things that we do for them sort of helped with that. But I think, like you said before, Axel, there's certain populations that are doing so well that there's too many of them for that population, and then there's other populations that are seriously hurting, and there's not a lot of light at the end of the tunnel right now. So having us to be the mouthpiece for that is really important. And we really take it seriously, and it's really fun. But I think, like you said, that we keep calling it the silent extinction. And when you say that to somebody, like, that's a good name for it. I had no idea, right? But I think it's important, unfortunately, for everyone to remember that extinction, like I said, it's happening every day. If you Google a list of 2019 extinctions, it's long, and if even animals I think there's a river dolphin. I can never pronounce the name, but there's a river dolphin in China that was like a national treasure. And due to dam building and overfishing and just habitat issues that they were consistently getting into, that animal went extinct in 2006. So having that mind piece, like, this was a national treasure. That's like the bald eagle going extinct. So really just thinking about those things, like silent extinctions, unfortunately, happen all the time. And I think it's great that we're using it for giraffe, because they are something that everyone can relate to.
Yeah, nobody wants to, see a world in the future where giraffe don't exist or elephants don't exist. And you think about your children and the idea that they need to be able, we have a responsibility and an obligation to to help protect them and to save them, which is, the topic of tonight is saving giraffe, how we can all help. So before we get to that, Axel, what species of giraffe do we have? So Wild Tomorrow Fund, I think I mentioned at the beginning, we have a habitat protection project, and we've saved land in Southern Africa, and we've been rewilding and reintroducing wildlife that, should occur there, and including giraffe, which is super exciting. And Axel, what species do we have there?
So we have, being in South Africa, we have the Southern African giraffe, or the South African giraffe is the subspecies.
Easy to remember.
Which is the most prevalent one. But there's been a history of mixing giraffes in the past in South Africa, and so it's difficult to say how genetically pure they are, or how genetically pure any giraffe is in South Africa, because a lot of them were moved to other parts of the country and mixed around with other species, or other giraffes from other parts of the world. But we know that our giraffes came from local reserves that were overpopulated, and we were able to establish a new
I think
population, which is really exciting.
Axel froze on me for a second, but it might have been me. Axel, actually, if we go back to your screen here, and this was that point about, it's shocking how few giraffe there are. There are 1 million deer in upstate New York alone. That's 10 times more than there are wild giraffe in Africa. So I think that's a really crazy point to make of how few there are. And Axel, I think the other slide is the comparison of our giraffe and the reticulated giraffe. So on the left there, that's a reticulated giraffe in Kenya. That's the same type of giraffe that is at Zoo Miami, and they are endangered. So, they really need conservation help. On the right is the South African giraffe, and actually that's from that's an image taken by a volunteer who's actually joining us live. I can see her. Hello, Nadia. So that's one of her photos. She contributed of one of our giraffe. So you can see they're different. And if you go to the next slide, it's like a zoom in. You can see how different their patterns are. And it's one way to distinguish between the different subspecies, roughly. But what's amazing about giraffe is that their coat patterns are like fingerprints. So you can actually tell who is who if you look for markings and really get to know the giraffe. Is that how you guys at the zoo tell them apart?
Everybody has their own way. Some people look at their ossicones because their ossicones aren't all exactly the same. And like we have one boy who has like his both go one direction. But I look at the pattern, but right on the chest specifically, they're all very individual chest patterns. And then they do have weird markings. We have one who has like a Z on the side of his neck. We had one boy who had hearts, and then all of his kids actually had hearts in their patterns somewhere on them.
That's amazing. I was wondering about that actually, if it's inherited some of the patterns. I don't know if anyone's ever studied that, but it would be pretty amazing. Like you said, we have one giraffe that has it looks like a dog paw print on his neck, which is cute, and all those little markings. So,
well, I'm sure if you want someone studying that in your area, Tabitha could, clear up her calendar.
That would be amazing.
What's funny is I literally had a conversation with a guest about how to tell the goats apart, and I was like, it's just like telling your friends apart once you get to know them. But yeah, you got to spend the time to get to know them first. So I'm one of the people who looks at the ossicones because I can never remember the Z or the hearts or the stuff, other things. But anyway, I thought that was a great point because telling them apart is sometimes the only way you can actually accomplish proper management of the animals, right?
Right. And yeah, I mean, for us, it's a little more difficult because they're out there in the wild, although they are at our reserve, it is relatively easy to find them. They tend to all be together usually and hang out in the same spots at different times of day. So we have an ID kit where we're taking photos, but, we don't have photos of all the fronts. So it's sometimes hard to distinguish in a photo who is who.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I want to show a video of our giraffe. I mentioned that for us in our habitat protection program, rewilding giraffe is probably one of our highlights. So I would love to share that with everyone. So come with me and let's meet the giraffe of Ukuela. Always makes me so happy to see that.
Yeah.
And you'll see they all have names, and we're so proud of our giraffe. They've been individually sponsored by donors who, you know, it's really interesting for us outside of South Africa and in cities, you know, this concept of rewilding, and that we as a charity have to find the animals from reserve and buy them actually from reserves that are overstocked. And so people say, what do you mean you can buy a giraffe? So you can buy a giraffe, and people helped us buy the giraffe individually. So it's a really amazing thing to do, and they got to name them. And it's a really amazing connection that they have with those giraffe that they've personally helped to rewild, and they have this safe home now on our reserve. You'll notice that in that video, it said 9 giraffe, and that was taken last year. Yes. Well, anyway, since that video, that was 2018. But since that video, we actually released another group of giraffes. So, I mean, I think that the videos tell such an amazing story. So I'm going to show you our latest release video.
Oh, that's so cool.
But I don't know, how does that make you feel? I know, Tabitha, that you know, I love watching your face watching that video of them, you know, jumping out. It's a little different. I think the zoo giraffe probably a little more used to transport. Or how is it with the giraffe when they have to move?
They're not used to transport. I think it's individual personalities where they sort of take to change better or worse depending on the individual. But we do it when they're, just like people. When they're smaller, that we don't have vehicles or mostly just highways that can accommodate a larger or taller giraffe. So we try and move them before they're full grown, because it's not feasible here. But I mean, we've had some where we thought it was going to be really rough and they were just going to be resistant, and we just sort of opened up our chute hallway and they were like, oh, this is nice, and they just sort of walked down and investigated themselves, and we, you know, politely closed a gate behind them, and they were like, oh, okay, and stepped up, no problem. The dismount in your video, the dismount where they jump off and they don't know there's like that little bit of a down.
Yeah, it's quite scary.
Just because there's so much leg, it's 6 foot of leg. That's terrifying for me to like watch and like not. Oh god, like right. My anxiety, my anxiety went up a little bit. Yeah. but it's also really cool to just see them in that big of a space and just be able to go and run and you know, it's like I was getting teary-eyed. Like that's just that's something that you don't think you're ever going to get to see in person, especially if you work up close with these guys like this. We know what our purpose is and why we're trying to help them and you know what the goal is at the end of the day, but to see something like that and to be involved in what we're doing now to help people want to do that or be a part of that is, you know, is amazing. So,
which is a great segue into, you know, our the topic tonight, which is how to save giraffe and how we're protecting them in our own ways, is, you know, in the field and through the work of the zoo. Rob, can you tell us how Zoo Miami is helping giraffe conservation?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah. So at Zoo Miami, you know, our goal is when people come through the gate that they leave a different person. You know, that we want them to come in, experience the zoo, and you know, we set the bar pretty low. You know, Miami is not especially the most like the audience that really wants to hear the highest level of like, you know, everything that's going on. So a lot of times we just settle with, you know, we are super happy if we can get someone to say like, oh, wow, you know, that's what we want, you know, something as simple as that. And then we, you know, we of course provide everything we can for all of the layers in between, all the different tiers of people and the interactions that they want to have. So, you know, at the zoo, we obviously have a giraffe feeding. And what's really cool about that is that, you know, the animals that Tabitha and her team take care of, not only do they get to intermix sometimes with other species, we have had zebra out there with them. We've had, or zebra,
Grant's gazelle.
Grant's gazelle, right. And the ostrich, right. He's been out there. So, but when they're out on their habitat, you know, they're there with free range, you know, they get the whole thing. And a lot of times there's kind of like frequent flyer miles for the ones that love to go to the feeding. So if you've come to the zoo and you fed a giraffe, typically you fed like one or two. Oh. Like there's 2 or 3, right, Tabitha, that actually go up there and just like take all the food and they're like, yes, it's great. And the other ones are like, yeah, that looks fun. You have fun with that, you know. And they sit in the back in the shade, or you know, they hang out and mingle, you know. So being at the zoo, though, you know, every feeding costs money, and part of that money goes to conservation directly from what we do. I'm pretty sure it's a 50-50 split. You know, the zoo operation needs to fund itself, but also it goes straight to conservation. And I don't have the numbers, but, you know, we have a conservation fund that funds supporting elephants, supporting rhinos, supporting giraffe, and a number of other species. And, you know, every time someone walks through the gate, we participate in a program called Quarters for Conservation, where from their admission, a quarter of that goes directly to conservation, and we let them pick the project they want to fund. Oh, so we get to take it, and it's kind of fun. They put the quarter in, it does a little woo thing. So the point is that we want people to understand when they come to the zoo, they are being a conservationist. They are actively participating in that. And you know, as keepers, we all start off because we have an affinity for animals, or you know, we start off as trainers and all those things. But when it comes down to it, you know, we're here because we have this passion for animals and we want to share it. You know, we're here because not because we love working weekends and we love staying outside when it's raining and it's pouring, or it's when it's, what was today, the heat index, Tabitha, it was like 110.
Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. So, you know, when we get home, it's that moment of like, I feel like I changed something today. You know, I did that. And that's personally why I love being part of the ambassador program. You know, I love being there for, you know, those moments when a kid touches a snake for the first time and get to see the goosebumps happen and just be like, yeah, wow. Right. But, you know, part of what the zoo does is also support people like you guys. You know, we you know, there's Jeeps in Africa with a Zoo Miami logo right on it. You know, there's poachers there's rangers who are out there protecting animals from poachers. We don't support poachers. That have, you know, their salary paid by certain zoos. I think WCS does that a lot, the zoos in New York.
I'm just going to bring Yvette in because she wants to add something here. Hold
Absolutely, yeah.
Here she is. We're like the Brady Bunch here now. Okay.
I love it.
Yvette's back.
Sorry, I was muted. So one of the things I wanted to say about what Zoo Miami does that's really great also is that with this animal that's at the zoo, is always spoken as it's an ambassador of the ones out in the wild. And that's really important because it makes the connection for people that what the zoo is about is that. It's not just an attraction, and it's one of the things Zoo Miami does spectacularly.
Oh, thank you.
And I think, Tabitha, you mentioned that the zoo is also part of the AZA giraffe species survival program.
Yeah, the SSP. A lot of our animals, not just endangered or critically endangered, just the vast majority of our animals, if not every single one, are part of an SSP, which is the species survival plan. And it's sometimes we like to reference it as the eHarmony for the animal world.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we sort of like match them up. Not really, sometimes based on their likes, but mostly it's just genetics, and it's where they come from, and how far back their lineage is. Depends on the animal. Sometimes, you know, we get an animal who hasn't been documented very well, so we're not quite sure. But for the most part, it's to make sure that nobody's related, or you know, they're not completely unknown, and we have some sort of history as to how healthy they are and how long they live. And then it's also for the scientific point of it, where we know how long most of their descendants lived and how many you know, offspring they've had, and how well their lineage as a whole does. So yeah, the SSP is supremely important, and that's why we move animals in and out. We have all of our kids had, you know, breeding recommendations, so they were all moved to other facilities to go be paired up with other animals, so that they can produce stronger genetics for the population as a whole.
I love how you call them kids, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I think babies, right? You're so close to them.
And it's really important. The other thing is that, you know, the SSP it's basically a plan for keeping the giraffes that we have at zoos across the country in a, you know, a viable genetic situation, so that should we, you know, fail at protecting habitat in certain parts of the country, you know, that there's a contingency plan for when that habitat, when we get that habitat back, that we can have animals that are ready to go, you know. And so whether they're used to being trained or fed, you know, maybe we can set up a fact where their babies would then be able to go and do that. And that's essentially what we're doing. Like, we are the ark, right? We are the ark for all of these
worst
species.
case scenario, hopefully, you know, I think about the black rhinos or the northern white rhino, you know, we lost
a good example of that is the oryx. I believe that Zoo Miami was involved in the repopulation of them when there were none in the wild.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, we have a question here from Dale, who asked, does Zoo Miami do research on captive giraffe to help benefit wild animal conservation or other animals?
Absolutely. I don't know if we've done a study in a while, but I know one of our keepers has done a study. So he said at the end to do for conservation things. We study all sorts of things, and one of the keepers we have actually studied handedness in giraffes.
Like left hand, right hand?
Yeah, left hand, right hand. They had a tendency to go down, you know, to the right hand or left hand. So, you know, so there are certain things based on the observations that we have. I don't know how that could help conservation, but I'm sure it will. So
fascinating. Yeah.
You know, there's research going on all the time. We participate in a lot of welfare assessments and a lot of, you know, that help not only our animals, but animals across the country and animals in the wild. There's actually, I'll tell you about one. Actually, I'll probably hand it back to Tabitha, but one species that we have, the most that we know about them is from them in zoos, and that's the pygmy hippo. Because they're so secretive in the wild that when we have babies born in zoos, we're like, yeah, let him figure it out. Oh, he's eating mud. I guess that's what they do, you know? So, you know, I don't know if you have more to add to that, but as far as the things that you see out there.
I do know that we had a couple keepers actually do the research, and then they got a paper. I believe they got it published, and it was put in. I can't remember the book that it was put in. It's literally on my desk. But they studied. They got a temperature gun or a thermal imaging machine, and they studied to see if you could use temperature to tell when a female giraffe was going to give birth. So that question that you had asked off screen about like pregnant giraffe, if their research, you know, gets picked up sometime, they were trying to see if there was an increase or a decrease, or if there were any changes the closer that they got to having actually giving birth. And they found that the temperature actually it goes down, I believe.
Really? Huh.
And yeah, so right before they give birth, temperature drops, and it's like nothing, and then the next day they go into active labor. So it was really interesting and strange, but we had, you know, 3 females that they were monitoring, and before their due date, like well before, and then the changes that there are. So I mean, if that's something we could use in the wild, that'd be
I know Axel has a what do you call that FLIR thing that you can see the temperature? I don't know if it records that accurately. Thermal imaging.
Yeah. And that's actually, you know, according to the Giraffe Action Plan, you know, the Conservation Action Plan, of the countries that have listed giraffes being in decline, habitat transformation, and also climate change. Climate change has been one of the #1 things that has been put on there as a threat, and an area that needs to be focused on a lot more in research. And I know that there has been research done, and we were partly involved in the beginning in Wild Tomorrow Fund, of studying elephants and their thermal regulation, because you're going to have, or, you know, as climate changes, and especially in these tropic zones, you're seeing not necessarily higher temperatures, but larger fluctuations in those temperatures. So it might be really hot for a set number of days or weeks, but then it's that change back that tends to, you know, that drop in temperature that can really throw off animals. And that's where, you know, you start to see losses in your population, especially when there's pre-existing chronic diseases like tuberculosis and other diseases as well. So I know that there has been research on other species looking at thermal regulation, and it's been so important to have those species in zoos where you have capable people who can collect that data, because you can't always walk up to a giraffe and say, "Hey, I need to take your temperature." Even a rectal temperature would be quite hard. So,
another a study that I heard about, it was 2015, that could only be done easily at zoos on giraffe, was, you know, the quiet. Actually, it's a question for you, Tabitha. You know, they don't make a lot of noise, and when people thought they were very quiet, but they actually vocalized below our hearing range, and they found that it was only because of a study of the giraffe in the zoo that they, and this is the sweetest fact, that they hum to each other at nighttime.
Oh,
yeah. I mean,
that's kind of adorable.
What that means, but they're communicating at nighttime to each other in this low hum. So you'll have to listen out for it. Although, you know, we can't hear it; it's below our range. But you know, it's interesting. I think people. I read that, you know, there was this assumption that giraffe weren't so social. You know, that because they didn't audibly in our range communicate very much, that there was this thought that they weren't communicating a lot between themselves, but actually they do. We just don't hear it. So.
That's cool.
I think that's their cousins, the okapi, do the same thing. There's a wavelength that we absolutely cannot hear, but I think White Oak did a recording of a female calling her calf from, and it was just her standing in another barn, and the calf got up and ran over, and they were like, "Can you hear anything?" And then they adjusted the you know, what we could hear on our level, and it ended up being like a really long call, and it sounded almost like a purr or like a, you know, and like you could hear it. So, you know, they're related, and I absolutely believe they have to be able to communicate with each other and have it not be audible to other things. So, I mean, you know,
I think that's so cool. You know, there's a lot of animals that have that, and it just makes me think like how many more have that awesome feature. You know, I've recently been able to work with the elephants a lot more. And there's certain times you're in there and you're just like, why is my chest rumbling right now? You know, and then you're like, oh, she's looking over here. She must be having a communication, you know, and it's just like, you know, it reminds me of that movie, The Sixth Sense, where they like turn the volume up on that little recording they're having. They're like, oh my God, there's someone talking. So, you know, that happens all the time. And, you know, alligators, when they're mating, and the male alligators, the bull alligators, they get in the water and they have this this sound that happens, and it just rattles the water off their backs. and they've done tests of it, and it's just such a low frequency. You just got to imagine there's so much communication going on out there that humans just, are not attuned
Missing
to.
out on.
Yeah, we're just missing it, Tabitha.
Now, I want to make sure we have time to talk about a lot of people's favorite subject, which is giraffe babies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's incredible. Zoo Miami, in your history, have had how many giraffe births? It was over 50.
Yeah, I think we're up to 55 now. Last year put us in at 55 with our 3 that we had. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success, and I mean, we have an awesome team that puts in a lot of time to take care of these guys and make sure that everybody's being fed and kids aren't being pushed around or they have adequate time to nurse. So and if anything goes wrong, that we get them their antibiotics, and we have one animal that has to be medicated twice a day. So it's things like that, but it's the people that work with them that put in all that time to make sure that they're so well taken care of, really.
And when there is a giraffe birth, are you there, Tabitha? Like, is it kind of you all watching and waiting and helping and like how for us we're not sure what day, we have no idea.
Sometimes
or even
we're not there,
but yeah.
Sometimes we're not there, and it happens overnight. But typically, I think our recent girls tend to just aim for like middle of the day, late morning, middle of the day. And the last 3 that we've had have been. There's one that was born in a rainstorm. But yeah, the only help that we offer or would try to assist in is if something looked physically wrong, or if mom tripped or hurt it or something. But for the most part, we've had a really long line of really healthy kids and healthy moms. So the kids come out really robust. That's a good word. And as long as they stand up and their joints aren't, compromised in any way, which we haven't had that problem in a really long time that I'm aware of. As long as, they're able to stand up on their own, then mom will walk them through everything else that they need to do. And then we slowly reintroduce members of the herd back once the kid gets its footing, because they're like on wet noodles sometimes. So
on that note, we have a video from Zoo Miami of one of your giraffe births. So let me put that on for everyone because it's adorable. Right. Wow. That was
just want to root for him.
Yeah, when it falls over and spread eagles.
Yeah, that's laying out. It's like, it's so painful. I can't. Oh, yeah. They're really flexible at that stage, obviously, because they can stay folded up inside of mom. So coming out, it's not a big deal, but they'll tighten up, and the tendons and everything will tighten up after a few weeks.
That is so cool.
That's actually one of our females named Mia, and she currently still resides with us. So
it's amazing.
That was one of her many kids.
So for Wild Tomorrow Fun, we had I think from the moment we introduced giraffe, we were really hoping for babies eventually. We had males and females, so we were wondering, and like we spoke earlier that we don't quite know, we weren't quite sure if a giraffe was pregnant or not. It's a little, they looked around, but it was hard to tell. But
from afar, yeah.
And so we were super proud. Our first giraffe was born in December.
All right.
So, yeah, actually, I think you have some pictures. It's like bringing out the baby photos. So hold on.
Yeah, right.
No, let's do this. That's totally okay.
And actually, actually, you do. Oh no, actually, you didn't take this one, but you were basically there.
Yeah, this was the first. Yes, obviously, as Wendy was mentioning earlier, we've had 3 reintroduction of giraffe. But similar to what Tabitha was talking about earlier, where you can't move them when they get too large, because it's dangerous, and also it's dangerous to capture them in the first place, because unlike captive giraffes, we can't just herd them in or ask them to go into. So our giraffes are all relatively quite young. And we weren't sure exactly when they were going to reach sexual maturity or exactly how old they were. So anyways, yeah, it was an amazing surprise to see a baby giraffe. This was on the 14th of December. last year, I think.
Yeah, and she now has a name, Victoria, and actually her human grandmother's here, Eileen. I'm going to put her
all right
from Philly. That's her grand giraffe daughter. No, anyway, you know, it's so cute that this little giraffe is now named Victoria after our colleague Tori, who is in the field in South Africa. So it's our very special first giraffe. And Axel, I think you have another few photos.
Yeah, so this is about a month later. So the giraffe's about a month old. And our team of rangers on the ground continued to monitor it, make sure it was healthy. Obviously, we don't get very involved, and that's about the distance. You know, that's with a telephotic lens. We don't have a lot of large danger, you know, like we don't have lions and elephants on Ukuala, on our reserve. So we can walk the animals, and our field rangers walk them quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, this actually the photographer who, Martin Meyer, he's South African, and he came and captured this incredible image of our first giraffe. And he's up, it must be very late in South Africa. So thank you, Martin, for staying up late. But Thanks, this incredible Martin. Portrait of our first giraffe, we're very proud. And he, you know, it's really tough. It took him 3 days to actually be able to even find the giraffe. The mother had hidden it in the grass, you know, and was away from the herd. So it was a real tough assignment for him to get that photo. But we're very proud, as you can tell, of our first wild giraffe. And this
is when we first saw first captured it on camera, was seeing the baby, and myself and one of the managers went to go take a look after hearing another report that someone had seen it. And yeah, this was like the first picture that we got, was this little head popping up and a very proud family around it.
Hello.
So, that's awesome.
Yeah. And actually, we had another video from, let's go back to Zoo Miami's baby. There was a really cute video we have to show of, I don't know if it was the same giraffe baby, but when its first steps out on exhibit. So let's take a look at that very cute video.
Yeah, little guy.
Yeah, they like to take a stretch and like run and do the length of their exhibit and then sleep for a good couple hours. So
as
they
kids do
themselves. It's the best. They like grass. Oh God, what is this? And take off, and then everybody gets really tired after that.
I remember when I visited with the vet, and we visited the giraffe, and I just remember watching the baby. It was a young giraffe chasing a chameleon.
An iguana.
Yeah. Like, you know, it was so funny, and it would make the iguana move. You know, it would had its nose down to the ground investigating, and the iguana was probably like, "Oh, will you stop?" You know, like, yeah. So this giraffe was sort of all around the enclosure.
Yeah, we have a hard time telling the iguanas that, you know, please, this is Giraffe's house for now. You know, it's so fun seeing the babies run though. Like, just like I was gonna say in your video from before, they look so clumsy. I think someone else mentioned that, like, beautiful but clumsy. It's so hard to tell which part is in slow motion and which part's real life, you know? I just have this like goofy guy laugh in my head whenever I see a giraffe, like, as they run around. They're just these amazing clumsy animals, but you know, just being able to see that and and just watch the baby as he's, you know, building up those muscles, running his sprints for the day. It's super cool.
We have another, before we get to some extra questions from the audience, we have another video to show. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we did have another surprise. But let me just show you the video and you'll see. Hold on.
These giraffes were reintroduced to Ukuwela through funding from our donors. We're very happy to say that a few months ago, last year, we had a baby born on the property, and we believe one of the other females might be pregnant, and are very hopeful about that. If you look at the male in front, the top of his horns are bald when they are older, and female, the top of their horns tend to have long hair.
Two, 421.
Standing by.
Here's where we think there's something going on with the giraffe. One of the females has separated from the group, and it's a pregnant female. Okay, you keep an eye out for them.
Okay, guys, I just heard that one giraffe is separated from the group.
Yeah.
Why don't we just go there and see what's happening?
Came up the road and we saw this giraffe stand by herself, which is not very common for them to do, and we thought maybe we might come check on it because we thought one or two of the giraffe might be pregnant. And on the way back now we came across her still here, and in the long grass, you can't quite see it now, but in the long grass there's a baby giraffe that's just been born. But yes, it's our second giraffe to be born on the property, and you guys are the first to know.
That's adorable.
And
awesome.
then there were two.
Yeah, best thing to happen in lockdown. So that was, when was that? Like, well, not even a month ago. And we actually were not expecting it. We had a hunch, but we weren't sure. We need to talk to you, Tabitha, next time and send you pictures of giraffe and be like, is it pregnant?
Absolutely.
And we were out, the team were actually happened to be out filming, and we're so lucky to come to, so we kind of reenacted it, but it was a huge surprise and our first boy, so very exciting.
Oh.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so I mean, what an amazing conversation. I think, you know, for us, and I'm sure for you at the zoo, it's so hopeful to see life returning to our reserve, which, you know, was formerly a farmland. It was going to be destroyed for pineapple farming. You know, it's the same story around Africa with loss of and around the world, loss of habitat. So we're kind of fighting back in our small corner of the world. And so for us, seeing baby giraffe born is super symbolic of what we're trying to do, and really beautiful. So
that's so awesome what you guys do. It's so cool that you're able to protect that habitat for them, you know. Like Tabitha said before, being able to see them go and have that open space, you know, that's protected by rangers, you know. That's one of the best things we love to see. We love to see them go out, you know, be giraffes without all of the pressures that people put on them, not having habitat, poaching, you know, all those things. It's just, it's amazing to be a part of the conservation, because it's so far away from what we deal with on the daily here in Miami, you know.
But so, your zoo, I mean, I was speaking with Yvette, and you have almost 1 million visitors a year. So it's a huge opportunity for people to connect to animals. Yeah, and I know that's how and why Axel became an ecologist and dedicated his life to conservation, was because of being able to go to visit a zoo and connect to the animals. So it's super important to have them there as ambassadors.
Absolutely.
Great. You know, and part of our gig is you know, our mission at the zoo is sharing the wonder of wildlife for future generations, and, you know, and conserving it for future generations. And, we need people like you to support because we can't do it ourselves. We can't be sending Tabitha to Africa every other week. We have to need her here.
She put her hand up.
She has a job to do. But, yes, the things that we are able to do, with a million people coming through the gate is we get to share, just a piece of it. And the beauty of Zoo Miami is it's so big, people aren't going to have the same experience every time, Right. One of the things I like to bring to one of my favorite parts of my job is to bring them on a behind the scenes tour. And we have a special behind the scenes where they can go basically right ground level with the giraffe. And we have a gate that opens up and they can be right there with a gate in between them. So the giraffe don't accidentally walk on you. But you just basically get to be there. And I try to be respectful. I say, hello, Your Highness, right? But the point is that these guys have this appeal when there's a giraffe that's, 17 feet tall, you said, Tabitha?
Yeah, 16 to 17 we have.
Reaching down over your head to get the little piece of lettuce, and you're just like, oh my goodness, don't ever make me move, And even for us, it never gets old. And that's why we love what we do.
I have to say, when I went with Yvette and I fed the giraffe the lettuce, and it's amazing because I've never, for us, seeing them at a distance in the wild, you definitely don't get that close, and it's really special to just observe them and be that close to them. I want to make sure we get to some of these awesome questions. So the first one here, Jeff asked me, but I'm going to give this one to Axel. Of the giraffe and the koala, what is the mix of male and female? Now that baby is a male, so we're going to do the numbers. And
so we have 13 giraffe in total, including the 2 babies. One of the babies is a male, and I believe that there are 2 males, sub-adult to adult males. So that would mean that there's 3. So it's 3 to 10.
We've introduced more males, but it's a funny problem where we've had a few giraffe jump the fence. They walk over a fence. They are so tall. So we've had that happen like 3 times where we've managed to get 2. But anyway, one is permanently next door, so we're not sure if that's the male. But there's definitely, the last introduction we did were 2 males, 2 females. So we've got to update our ID kits.
It's funny how they disperse. That's what giraffes do, right? It's the fence. Yeah. Whatever. I think that's just a point on that is that you have a fence and they can walk over it, and that's kind of one of the biggest challenges people like you guys I'm sure face is how can you protect a border on a land that's so big. So kudos for everything you've been able to accomplish with that.
Thank you. It's a really great question. Actually, someone had this, talking about how special it is to meet giraffe, and you don't have to go as far as Uganda. You can go to Zoo Miami, but it's a behind the scenes tour feeding a giraffe at a rehab center. I mean, it's unforgettable. It's something you never forget. It's amazing. We have a great question. Well, Paula, who is one of our former volunteers, she keeps volunteering, but she came to the field with us and loved it. So thanks, Paula. That's great. And I mean, this year with COVID-19, we unfortunately don't have volunteer trips, but next year, I don't know, Yvette's bringing people from Florida. So check out Reclaim Earth.
As soon as they let us travel again, we're back at it.
And Yvette, what's your website where people can look up more information about you if they're in Miami?
So it's reclaimedearthwildlife.com. And that's our handle on Instagram and Facebook as well. So it's nice and easy across the board.
Great. We'd love more Floridians to come on a trip and join us in South Africa. And now this is a really great question because it really leads us to, the show, wrapping up.
Hey, Yanni. That's a great.
I this question on.
It's so funny seeing all the zoo people tune in. I see awesome. Donna, Kaylin, Madison, Ryan, Monica, Yanni. It's so fun. Hi, guys. So what does everyday person do to support conservation? I mean, I was sorry if I just took over. I apologize. But what we always tell people is, first and foremost, like care. Do the things that matter. And by caring, what I mean is ask questions when you are deciding where to spend your money. Where did this come from? How is this farmed? How was this item made? Where did it come from? You know, that sort of thing is really important. But the other thing is to support conservation institutions like zoos across the country. But there's many other institutions like Yvette's and like you guys that basically build the support system for people who have the means and have the ideas and have the methods to help and preserve land and help animals and, you know, fund rangers. And that's one of the biggest things that we push at Zoo Miami is that, you know, we're a conservation institution. You come to us because you are a conservationist, you know, and helping people realize that identity, I think can be the biggest thing. So I would say share your love for wildlife, whether it's the squirrels, the iguanas, the giraffes, the rhinos. Some people like squid, you know, whatever it is that you like, you know, be passionate about it and learn more about it and ask the right questions when you're deciding where to spend your money, because I think that's one of the biggest things. You keep talking about pineapple farms. We at the zoo often talk about palm oil is one of the biggest things. There's an app for that. So check that out. Look up palm oil. All you do is type in palm oil and you'll find an app that will help you make good choices with your purchases. But, you know, by supporting zoos and following their lead, we post links to places that we support all the time. And I think that's a huge, huge thing. So anyway, that's my time. I yield.
Tabitha, what's your message on how to help giraffe?
I agree with Rob, is to care and do your research and make sure you're helping things and you're not putting your money in the wrong place. But also, I mean, support your local zoos and AZA accredited institutions and you know, ask us questions. We will help. We will, if we don't have the answer, we'll get it for you. We will try. You know, we only want the best for our animals, so come see them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Axel.
Well, you know, in this series that since we've started, since COVID-19, we talked about captive tigers and lions, and we've talked about ivory and elephants and rhinos. And I think in each of those, there's been something that we can tell everyday people. There's like a bit more of a tangible thing. You know, you don't go to accredited zoos. You know, you can be a part of helping us find illegal ivory in the U.S. And maybe giraffes, maybe one reason why it is the silent extinction is that it doesn't feel as tangible to be able to help. And that's where I think it's important that we remember that in all the places that giraffe are declining, again, it's habitat. Yeah, there are definitely some social political issues that are very difficult to handle and perhaps out of the range of the everyday person. But it still comes down to protecting habitat and making sure that it's secure, there's habitat connectivity, and that it's protected properly. And if we just have a safe place for animals, they're going to do fine. And giraffes are a prime example of that. And Ukawela and the giraffes that we have and we've reintroduced through Wild Tomorrow Fund are a prime example of how if you just save habitat, safe places, and animals will thrive. So I think that's the key going forward is supporting organizations like ours that are looking not just at, okay, let's just look at the species, but we're looking at it from a habitat connectivity and a landscape scope and protecting it and just making sure that it stays wild. Because if we do that, giraffes will come back, as has been seen in Uganda.
And lions. And I'll add to that, Axel. I mean, you know, for us at Wild Tomorrow Fund, our focus is habitat protection. And E.O. Wilson, who we're a big fan of, his half Earth theory, basically, if we want to save 80% of species on Earth, and they did the science and it's around habitat protection, we need to protect 50% of habitat, you know. So it's a big number. So we got to really, but that's what it's going to take if we really want to save species from extinction. So yeah, for Wild Tomorrow Fund, we're all habitat and protecting it and supporting the rangers who keep it safe and stop poaching. And if you want to donate to our habitat protection program, we still working to save our corridor. If you go to wildtomorrowfund.org, in the right-hand corner, donate, you can go, there's Save Habitat, and we will make sure those funds are invested in the land. We still have a way to go to finish fundraising. Is that your dog, Rob?
I knew dog.
We're all animal lovers here. So.
And rescue your pets, folks.
That's where it starts. You know, our major, our supporters, for the most part, are all massive animal lovers. I say the profile of the person who's saving giraffe and other animals in the wild are those who have their favorite pet as, you know, on their phone. So, I mean, Tabitha, you probably get giraffe on yours, or maybe the pygmy hippo, but that's for me the calling.
Probably the hippo.
Yvette, you know, what's your thoughts on how we can all help?
So I think the big message to take away here is that there is a very real human impact, right? And we've just spread it so far. We really have to become aware of how we can start reducing that. And whether it's habitat loss or how Rob was saying, like, really pay attention to where your dollars are going here, it makes a difference for the efforts being done on the ground, right? And for me, the biggest thing is talk about it, because if you care about something and you don't share about it, it doesn't get bigger.
Right.
So I think everyone that is on here tonight and learning about all of this, share with someone about it, because they may not know.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And then I think, Rob, you had a message for your AZA colleagues, because there's a film that is perfect for giraffe lovers out there called The Women
Absolutely.
Who Love
And I
Giraffe.
think it's the main thing is that it highlights an initiative of what you can do right now to help. There's a movie out that is called The Girl Who Loved Giraffe. And it's a story about a lady who at 23 made a trip to Africa and then basically devoted her life to giraffe. And the leader of AZA, the director, Dan Ash, actually put out a big email to everybody to promote the video, to sign in. He made it available for everyone to sign in and purchase, being able to watch it for a few days at a time, for $12. And you know, obviously the people who made the film have to, you know, all of that stuff, but half of that money goes straight to the AZA Safe Fund, which supports giraffe conservation. And so, you know, that right there is, you're paying $12 for a movie your whole family can watch, you know, have a party, whatever. But, you know, bring people over and watch it. And in doing that, you're supporting exactly what you're watching, that conservation. You know, you're sharing your passion, you're learning more. You know, it's one of the toughest things to do, to tell people, like, hey, they're asking you for the answer, and you're like, wow, keep asking questions, learn more, you know. You're on the right path, just keep doing this. And they're like, no, I want to know how I can help. Like, this is it, you know. You know, if you're a kid in an inner city, it's you know, having that conversation when you get home with your parents. You know, if you're a parent, you're trying to teach your kids, it's, you know, making every day an opportunity to point out things in nature so that they're looking for it. You know, at the zoo, we're constantly trying to make those connections, because there's evidence, scientific evidence, that kids who don't make a connection with animals before like age 5 don't develop certain, you know, empathy and emotions that others do. And so, you know, just having that science not done by zookeepers to back up what we're doing is super important. So I hope everyone can check that out. I'm sure if you just look up A Girl Who Loves Giraffe. Did you have the link to that, Wendy, or maybe we can post it in the notes?
We can post it in the comments later. I saw it at a film festival in New York. I know that it's available on Netflix in Canada because it was made in Canada, but we can post that link, yes, and I encourage everyone to watch it. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, but I'm excited. I can't wait. I haven't had a good cry in a while.
Very moving. On that note, thanks everybody so much. Firstly, to our amazing panelists. We were so excited to have you tonight. What an amazing conversation. And, you know, I think collectively we helped raise awareness about giraffes so that their, you know, cause can't be silent. You know, so we really glad, and thank you to everybody who joined us live. We hope you enjoyed it. And our next event, so Wild Tomorrow Fun, we've done a few of these in the series, and next up we're going to be talking about pangolins, the most trafficked animal in the world. So stay tuned. That'll be our next topic, and we look forward to everyone joining us.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you guys for having us.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everybody for tuning in. You rock.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.